Then her arm bent and extended its reach, coming down from the ceiling, one body part at a time. Her gaze was empty and lifeless, her face rhythmically moving side to side like an animal waiting to pounce. I was certain I was going to die from fear. When I was 18, my life took a sharp and unexpected turn. My girlfriend at the time ended up going to jail for writing bad checks, leaving me with no choice but to move back in with my mom. It wasn't an easy decision, but I didn't have any other options. My mom's house was always a place I associated with safety and comfort, yet this time, it felt different. There was an underlying tension in the air that I just couldn't quite put my finger on. My mom had this habit that always unnerved me. She would talk to the ghost of my deceased grandmother, Jane, who had died when I was 8 years old from cancer. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved my Grandma Jane, but anything with ghosts freaked me right out. She used a touch lamp for these conversations, claiming the flickering light was a form of communication. Whenever she was in the kitchen, I'd hear her murmur softly to the lamp, her voice carrying a tone of tender familiarity. To me, it was just another eccentricity of hers, something I tried to ignore. Again, don't get me wrong, ghosts scared me, but I dismissed her behavior as a quirk. It's just a coping mechanism for her grief by losing her mom. The basement where I slept was well kept, thanks to my mom's meticulous cleaning habits. She was a neat freak and every corner of the house reflected her efforts to maintain this order. The basement, though, had a different vibe. It was clean but not particularly welcoming. My sleep arrangement wasn't ideal. I made do with the couch situated about 10 feet from the stairs that led to the backyard. The layout of the basement was a little peculiar. You'd enter through a lock gate directly into the backyard, past the in-ground swimming pool, and open up the main door, which was on the left of that, and then there would be the stairs that led down to the basement. To my right, an old TV was perched on an entertainment stand, definitely a relic of the 90s. Its a bulky frame and flickering screen seemed like a portal to a different era. To my left, there was a bathroom and beside it, an unfinished bedroom. The bare walls and exposed framework of the bedroom gave it an eerie and complete feeling. It wasn't the most comfortable sleeping arrangement, but it was what I had, and I tried to make the best of it. Shortly after moving in, things started feeling strange. My mom had been searching for her grandmother's birth certificate, swearing it was in her filing cabinet. She was very meticulous about her paperwork and honestly about everything. It was very unlike her to misplace something so important. For days she tore through the house, looking in every possible nook and cranny, but it was nowhere to be found. Then, as if it was magic, one morning it mysteriously reappeared on the kitchen table. My mom was certain she hadn't left it there and attributed this to her mother trying to communicate with her. It was as if someone or something had moved it intentionally. Keys also began to disappear and reappear in very odd places in the house. My mom would leave her keys in her purse, only to find them later on the dining room table or in the bathroom. I would hear her say out loud, "That's pretty funny, Mom," as if she was acknowledging her mother's prank from beyond the grave. It was as if they were being moved intentionally, placed in spots where she wouldn't have naturally left them herself. At first, I thought my mom was simply being forgetful, but the frequency of these occurrences made it hard to ignore. The atmosphere in the house grew increasingly unnerving. The touch lamp in the kitchen seemed to flicker more frequently when my mom spoke to it. At times, I could swear I heard faint whispers coming from the basement when I was alone upstairs. It was as if the house itself was trying to communicate something to me, but I was way too frightened to listen, and honestly, I didn't even want to. I brushed off these oddities, attributing them to my mom's quirks and my overactive imagination. My mom's conversations with the touch lamp became a regular background noise. She'd sit at the kitchen table, the lamp in front of her, softly talking to it as if she were having a heartfelt chat with an old friend. I tried not to eavesdrop, but sometimes her words would drift my way. She'd tell the lamp about her day, about how much she missed her mom, and how she wished things were different. There was an intimacy in these conversations, but still, the entire scenario just gave me the creeps. One evening, as I lay on the couch in the basement, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The basement, dimly lit by a single overhead light, seemed to close in around me. The shadows cast by the unfinished bedroom were kind of creepy, giving the fears of my head legitimacy that my dead grandmother was possibly somewhere near. On second thought, I don't want to even think about it. I turned on the TV to drown out the creaks and groans of the house. The static-filled screen did little to alleviate my unease. But the weird thing is that I couldn't completely shake the feeling that I was still being watched. The basement had always been a place of refuge for me as a child, a space where I could escape the prying eyes of the adults and lose myself in video games and a little bit of mischief. But now it felt different. I couldn't quite nail it down, but it just felt off, like the space itself had changed, becoming something darker and more malevolent. I told myself, ghosts aren't real, she's not not really here, and my mom is talking to a stupid broken lamp. That's all it is. Plus, I really needed some sleep. Dwelling on this nonsense isn't going to get me there any faster either. Later that night, I woke up to the sound of something shuffling somewhere in the unfinished bedroom. Then a soft, almost imperceptible whisper echoed from the dark bedroom. I listened closer, giving it just a little bit more focus, and I thought I heard my name being called. What the Then I suddenly woke up covered in sweat and the sunlight beaming onto my face. Thank God it was just a dream. The smell of eggs and toast came from the kitchen upstairs. I went upstairs to find my mom bustling about the kitchen trying to get ready for work. She told me to help myself and that there was plenty more in the microwave if I wanted it. She then gave me one of those uncomfortable mommy hugs as if I was still a 5-year-old and ran out the door to work. As I was about to sit down, I saw that damn lamp and quickly decided to sit in the living room so it wasn't anywhere near me. I didn't even want to look at it. That thing is just weird. I turned on the TV and started to stuff my face. My mind kept wandering back to that dream. I rationalized that it's just being a dream and my mind was just fixated on things that can easily be explained. Like my mom is just a weirdo who talks to broken appliances and we sometimes misplace things. I mean, I once lost the TV remote in my own back pocket for God's sakes. It was just my overactive imagination working its way into my sleep. This put my mind at ease and I just flat out ignored the goofy lamp stuff and anything else that was weird because ghosts aren't real, right? The next few days were business as usual. Nothing out of place, no bad dreams. But then, one evening, I was watching TV in the basement when the screen suddenly went black. The power hadn't gone out, the room was still lit up by the overhead light, and all the other stuff was on. I got up to check the TV, fiddling with the buttons in hope of getting it to work again. As I bent down to inspect the cables, I felt a cold breeze brush against the back of my neck. I quickly turned my head around, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. Then, suddenly the TV turned on with the volume blaring right in my ear. What the I nearly jumped out of my damn skin. I quickly ran back to the couch, diving under the blankets, desperately hammering the volume down button on the remote. Jesus Christ, what the Just as the shock from what happened started to fully hit me, I heard the muffled sounds of my mother yelling, "What's going on?" I fumbled my words as I tried to give a below satisfactory, "Nothing, I'm fine, I just stubbed my toe on the couch." She shouted back with less enthusiasm, "Well, keep it down, I have to work tomorrow." Now, my mom is a lot like me, a light sleeper. I have to bring out my inner ninja to get around the house at night. That was the perfect distraction that I needed to get my mind off of whatever was going on with the stupid TV. I fell into the couch, throwing the blankets over my head, thoroughly done with the night. When I woke up, the day was like any other. Get up, eat breakfast, and scroll through the daytime reruns while trying to occupy my mind. But later that night, I found myself particularly restless. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows across the basement floor, and the usual hum of nighttime noises just seemed amplified. The distant sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves outside and the soft creaking of the house all blended into a symphony of sounds that I was not comfortable with. Around midnight, I finally began to drift off, my body surrendering to the exhaustion. It was in that hazy state between wakefulness and sleep that I first sensed something was wrong. The temperature suddenly dropped, and every hair on my body stood on end, pulling me from my deep sleep. I opened my eyes, blinking in the dim light, trying to shake off the grogginess. That's when I saw her. At the foot of the stairs, illuminated by the sliver of moonlight, stood the twisted figure of my grandmother. My breath caught in my throat, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. She looked almost exactly as I remembered her. Curly black hair, the nightgown that she wore before she died, but there was something off about her appearance. Her eyes were this sickly, unnatural yellow, staring at me expressionless, devoid of any recognizable human emotion. Something was really wrong with all of this. This isn't the Grandma Jane I remembered. No, not even close. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, but I could feel and see every detail so clearly. The way her hair framed her gaunt face, the way her nightgown clung to her emaciated frame. My heart slammed into my chest as I lay frozen on the couch, unable to move or make any sound. When she moved, her limbs bent in these unnatural angles as she clawed the walls, and her movements were very slow and deliberate. Her fingers were long and thin, scraping the surfaces as she made her way toward me. It was like watching a scene from a horror movie, only this time I was the main character. My body was paralyzed with fear, every instinct screaming at me, run, but I couldn't. There was nothing I could do. I was a helpless spectator to this unfolding nightmare. As she drew closer, the details of her face became more grotesque. Her skin was pallid and stretched tight over her bones, eyes glowing with this malevolent yellow light. I could hear the faint sound of her breath, raspy and uneven, as she inched her way forward. My vocal cords were strained and locked up in my throat. I was completely consumed by terror. When she reached the edge of the couch, she paused, her head tilting to one side then the other, as if she was studying me. Her eyes locked onto mine. The tension held my tongue to a nearly inaudible gasp. If you weren't right next to me, you might have thought I stopped breathing altogether. She slowly climbed herself onto the couch. I could feel her hands moving unnaturally, grasping onto my clothes and body. I don't know how to explain it, but her movements were more insect-like, but made from a human-looking form, if that makes any sense at all. Her face was mere inches from mine, and the stench of decay filled my nostrils as I fought the urge to gag. I silently pleaded over and over for her to just disappear. Her yellow eyes bore into mine. I wanted to scream, thrash, fight, but my body refused to cooperate. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, it was morning, and she was gone. The transition was jarring, like somebody had flipped a switch and the first rays of morning streamed through the small basement window and hit me in the face. I scrambled off the couch, nearly tripping over my feet as I ran up the stairs, bursting through the door into the backyard. The fresh morning air hit my face and I doubled over, struggling to catch my breath. I stood there for a while, trying to process what just happened. The rational part of my mind tried to convince me that this had just been a nightmare, a product of my subconscious that worked its way into my sleep. But the fear, the visceral terror I had felt, was too real to dismiss. My mom found me outside a short while later on her way out to work. I could see the concern etched in her face. She asked what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her because I knew she would just try to make me feel guilty for rejecting this nightmarish ghost masquerading as my grandmother. Then the rest of the day just passed in a blur. I went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the nightmarish encounter over and over. I avoided the basement for the rest of the day, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, my anxiety skyrocketed. The thought of facing another night in the basement just filled me with dread. I tried to convince my mom to let me sleep on the couch in the living room, but she insisted I stick to the basement because she didn't want me to keep waking her up. Damn it! Reluctantly, I descended the stairs. My feet felt heavy as I took my sweet time on each step. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, keeping the volume low so I didn't wake my mom. The hours dragged on, and despite my best efforts, sleep eventually claimed me. Around 3 a.m., I jolted awake, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. The room was eerily silent, my eyes strained as they tried to pierce the darkness. For a moment, everything seemed normal, but then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement coming from the unfinished bedroom. As my eyes gained their focus, I could see it was my grandmother's twisted form emerging from the shadows, and she was closer than she was the night before. My heart leapt into my throat as I watched her crawl along the ceiling, and her eyes were just locked onto mine. The fear was an overwhelming blanket of suffocation that wrapped itself around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I laid there paralyzed with terror as she made her way towards me, her movements again slow, almost languid, as if she was savoring the moment. When she came closer to the couch, she paused again, her head slowly swaying from side to side with those yellow eyes locked onto her target. I wanted to scream. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. She dropped to the floor, her figure obscured by the back of the couch. Then I saw her hands grasping the couch, pulling herself up and over. She climbed into the same position she was the night before, tilting her head side to side while keeping her eyes intently locked on mine. I felt her cold hand brush against my cheek. It sent a jolt of terror through my body. I tried to scream, but once again, nothing came out. It felt like this went on for hours, pinning me down, staring at me. Then suddenly, just as before, the transition from night to morning was abrupt. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone, and the light coming through practically smacked me in the face. I was gasping for air as I bolted up the stairs and into the backyard. What in the actual f*** is going on? Like, what just happened? None of this made sense. As my mom walked out back to get to work, she took notice of the anxiousness that I was feeling and asked if something was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. I just told her that I didn't sleep very well because it was uncomfortable being in the basement and it would take me some time to get adjusted reacted to it. I could tell by the look she gave me that she knew it wasn't the entire truth, but she didn't have enough time to ask any other questions, otherwise she would be late for work. Usually I was glad when my mother was gone, but I didn't want to be alone in that house after what happened. Even though I was really uncomfortable being there, I gathered my wits and walked back into the house. The day passed way too quickly. My mind was fixated on everything that had just happened, trying to figure out what and why, asking all of these questions about the whole situation that I quite frankly did not understand. I tried to get a few bites of food down, and I kept my distance away from the stairs and the basement, but panic shot through me as the realization that night was coming in just a little while. It felt like the sun was giving me the middle finger as it dipped below the horizon. A sense of soul-shattering terror slowly cut through me like a knife. I tried to distract myself, but the anxiety felt like it was tying my intestines into knots. The thought of facing another night in that basement scared the shit out of me, so profoundly it was almost paralyzing. My mom, oblivious to the horrors I was facing, went about her evening routine, and once again I found myself rowing up Schitt's Creek, descending those stairs alone. I couldn't sleep. Every noise seemed amplified in the oppressive silence of the basement. Around 2 a.m., the temperature in the room seemed to suddenly drop. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead again, and my eyes darted around the room. I felt a familiar chill run down my spine as I knew she was there before I even saw her. Once again, emerging from the shadows near the unfinished bedroom, the apparition made her way towards me, her movements more aggressive than ever before. Nothing about her seemed human. Her twisted form was even more grotesque than before. Her limbs bending at impossible angles took no time at all to reach me. Please go away, please go away, please, please, please go away, I said to myself in my head. Those horrifying yellow eyes never swayed from their target. I was frozen with fear, my body refusing to move. My throat tightened and I tried to scream, but once again, no sound came out. The terror was so overwhelming, it felt as if it was suffocating me. Then her arm bent and extended its reach, coming down from the ceiling, one body part at a time. I could feel her cold breath on my face. Her gaze was empty and lifeless, and I felt a shiver of pure terror run right through me. Her face rhythmically moving side to side like an animal waiting to pounce. I was certain I was going to die from fear. I desperately pleaded in my mind for her to go away, for this nightmare to end, but she didn't budge. I fought to do anything to break free, but my body was paralyzed. The only thing that managed to come out were the tears running down my cheeks. I was trapped in this hellish cage with her. And then, as abruptly as it began, it ended, and she was gone. Gasping for breath and drenched in sweat, I fell as I was scrambling up the stairs. I braced for impact, shielding my face with my arms so I didn't faceplant into the door that led to the backyard, hitting the door with a loud thud. I slid to the floor, below, still panting and wheezing, trying my hardest to get a full breath in. I sat there on my hands and knees, feeling really disorientated from everything that just happened, and the stinging sensation from slipping on the stairs eventually subsided. I slowly opened my eyes. I could see there was something that looked like paper below me, but my eyesight was too fuzzy to see what it was at first. When they finally adjusted, I could see that it was an old photograph of my grandmother, one that I've never seen before. Her eyes were wide, and her face gave a blank, emotionless stare directly into the camera. Etched in the old Polaroid in black ink, it said, "I'm not sorry." I was so startled by this that I almost fell right back down the stairs. I quickly grabbed the photo, tore it up, and threw it in the garbage. That message felt like a direct threat. I knew then that I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I needed to get away, so I started reaching out to all my friends, desperately seeking for a place to stay. I didn't care where, as long as it wasn't in that basement. After many calls and messages, finally my friend Anthony picked up. I explained the situation as best as I could without sounding completely insane. My friend could hear the desperation in my voice and agreed to let me stay with him. I felt instant relief when I heard this. Even though I wanted nothing to do with that basement, I still had to go back down there to pack my things. The anxiety was crippling, and I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff, but I wasn't staying a second longer than I had to. Thankfully, my mom wasn't home because she would have definitely heard all of this. It didn't feel right though, leaving the house without a note. I had no idea what to say, so I flat out lied and said that one of my friends wanted me to move in with them and that I love her very much and I would talk to her later that night. When I talked to my mom later that night, she sounded confused and worried, but could you blame her? I didn't end up telling her the truth until many years later. I stayed with my friend for a while, doing my best to put the experience behind me, but it was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I never stayed with my mom again after that. The fear of returning to that house was just too great. I eventually moved on with my life, but the terror from those nights left a scar that never fully healed. Even now, years later, the memory of those encounters remains vivid, a chilling testament to the thin veil between our world and what lies beyond.
Join us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. You don't want to miss what's coming next.